Yeah, I was talking about, there's a session on general population approaches to prevent cancers, and we were looking at different lifestyle risk factors. So I was talking about alcohol and research that, excuse me, my team has done, both estimating the impact of alcohol consumption on cancer rates, but also strategies which at the population level reduce people's intake of alcohol and reduce risks of a whole range of alcohol-related diseases, including cancer. Well, the one I was talking about in particular, and there's a lot of interest here, in particularly in the UK, is on minimum pricing, or minimum unit pricing as it's known as here, where people probably know that Scotland passed legislation some years ago to prevent cheap alcohol being available in Scotland as a means of improving health outcomes for the population. That was blocked by the multinational alcohol industry and has been held up for several years, been through the courts. My research has been used in that process as evidence, because we have minimum pricing in Canada, and I've done studies with teams of people from the States and the UK looking at the population health impacts whenever the minimum prices go up. Or sometimes there's 10 provinces in Canada, they all do minimum prices differently. So some of our studies have looked at, like in a quasi-experimental way, what happens before and after a major change in minimum pricing. So we can estimate impacts on consumption and on rates of disease attributable to alcohol and rates of injuries. So I was reporting some of those findings. Well, it's been in place at least since Prohibition ended. We had Prohibition up until the 20s in several provinces, including Ontario and British Columbia, where I am. And as a way, the government, as a sort of interim measure, took over the control and distribution of alcohol with a view to kind of keeping a lid on things, but they rapidly realised they could get massive revenues from it. And minimum pricing was used as a device to keep the market stable, to guarantee income for the government. But only recently are people waking up to the population health benefits of managing minimum prices for alcohol in a very considered way that looks at the targeting the alcohol contents, as stronger drinks have higher minimum prices than weaker drinks, for example. Estimates are that if you imagine a 10% change, either way, it could be increase or decrease. If it's a 10% increase in the minimum price, consumption of alcohol goes down about 8%. And we've found chronic diseases like cancers will be reduced by about 8 or 9% 2 or 3 years later. So there's an immediate impact on the acute injuries and poisonings, and that's a similar level, about 8 or 9% for a 10% increase in price. If the price goes down, very often in some provinces the minimum prices are actually going down with inflation. So it's very important, you can't just have minimum unit pricing at 50p, like it's got to be updated with inflation every year. So major effects, and the great thing about minimum pricing also is it only affects a small proportion of the market. It doesn't really punish moderate drinkers. It mainly targets the heavier drinkers who gravitate towards the cheapest alcohol. And there's the other advantage is there's disproportionate benefits for low income people and low-income areas. Both the modelling estimates and our observational research in Canada shows that people on lower incomes have a disproportionate benefit, or heavy drinkers on lower incomes have a disproportionate benefit in terms of reduced risk of illness and premature death. It depends on the system. It's a very, very good question. In the UK, I have to say that most of the benefits for simply setting a minimum price will flow to the industry. Because it's like a price-fixing card. So that's why the EU trade laws have been invoked, because it's anti-competitive. It's stopping the marketplace being efficient. But that means you get a bigger there's more room for making profits from selling the stuff because you've got a guaranteed lower floor price. And if that's raised periodically, it's a bonanza in some ways. So it's kind of surprising the multinational drinks industry is actually fighting it tooth and claw here in Europe. But that is only because, and I've talked to the people involved, the multinationals have interest not just in alcohol, but in tobacco and fast food and a whole range of things. And they do not want health to be used as, to be recognised as being grounds for trade laws being, worked around. They see it's the thin edge of the wedge, and trade in all manner of products could be restricted. God help us, on health grounds. Okay, in Canada it's great because they have alcohol monopolies. I mean, this is, I think, the perfect system. If you've got a product, and I think nicotine falls into that category. We're legalizing cannabis at the moment in Canada, and alcohol, we have, there's major health consequences. Much better to put the sale and distribution of that in the hands of a body that reports to a health minister, because of in order to minimize the health consequences. So in Canada, because the government's in the business of distributing and selling, they make huge profits from the sale of alcohol. I wish they also in Canada reported to the health minister. They report to finance ministers, and so you have to beat them over the head with these statistics to say you do it this way, not that way, if you also want good health outcomes. My take-home message, I guess, was that something like minimum pricing is going to reduce health inequalities, and that's a huge deal. It's going to improve health outcomes, specifically for this particular interest in cancer. It will reduce alcohol-attributable cancers, and there's many of those. In the UK, 13 or 14,000 a year. Our research suggests those are underestimates. There's certain problems in the research which lead to the rates of alcohol-attributable cancer being underestimated. So this is something the whole of the UK and the whole of Europe should be looking at as it's not just cost effective. The government makes money while they're saving lives and reducing healthcare costs and, preventing people getting seriously ill. So this is something that should be looked at in all jurisdictions.